You are listening to the Rooted Path Global Podcast. This is the podcast for faith leaders, community developers, funders, and field practitioners who believe that formation must come before mission. The Rooted Path is a 9-step congregational formation framework built on one conviction. What is formed is what gets scaled. Beneath the framework sits clear path intelligence, the technology layer designed to hold what formation reveals long enough for it to mature into infrastructure. Because the field has had theology, it has had methodology. What it has never had is a system to hold its memory. The companion book is now available on Amazon. Divine Assets, Faith-Based Leadership for a Global Movement. This is not a program. This is not a curriculum. This is the operating system the field has been missing. Formation before mission. Let us begin.
This is the Rooted Path Reflection, a conversation on asset mapping the missing category by Damian Curd.
And it is really a conversation that completely upends how we look at communities.
It really does. So imagine, if you will, two completely identical neighborhoods.
Right, yep.
They have the exact same median income, the same number of schools, the same brick and mortar infrastructure. Everything is identical on paper.
Right, the exact same starting line.
Exactly. Then a massive crisis hits, like a hurricane or an economic collapse, something just devastating.
Something that really tests the system.
Yeah. And one of those neighborhoods recovers in a matter of months. They pull together, they rebuild. But the other one, it completely fractures and just falls apart.
And you have to ask why. I mean, what is the actual difference there?
Right. And that is exactly what this deep dive is about. Today is for you, the listener. If you've ever looked at a community or an organization that has all the right pieces on paper, yet something vital is just missing when you actually try to get things done.
Yeah, that invisible gap between having resources and having resilience.
So we are looking at a specific 5-category asset mapping framework today. One that totally challenges how communities define their own value. We're going to explore the 4 standard categories where most conventional mapping stops.
Which is where things usually get stuck.
Totally. And then we'll look at why a specific 5th category changes everything. And crucially, why the strict sequence of these categories isn't just like a suggestion. It is the entire point of the exercise.
It really forces a massive shift in perspective. I mean, we are so heavily conditioned to measure only what we can easily see, you know, or quantify.
Yeah, if you can't put a number on it, it doesn't count.
Exactly. So when outside organizations come in to assess a neighborhood, they typically rely on what Damian, or Curd, as we'll refer to him today, describes as a secular framework.
Right.
And that framework almost universally operates in a very specific canonical order.
Which, I mean, makes sense on a practical level, right? When you want to know what a community is worth, your first instinct is to grab a clipboard and just start counting things.
Yeah, you count what's visible.
So walk us through that standard order. Where does a typical asset map even begin?
It begins with skills. This is the absolute baseline of what the people in the room actually know how to do.
So we're talking about like trades and degrees.
Yeah, exactly. We were talking about the trades, the specialized knowledge, formal degrees, but also the lived experience of navigating complex systems.
Ah, okay.
Right. So you map out the mechanics, the accountants, the organizers. That's category 1. Once you have that, the second category is relationships.
This would be the informal networks, right? Like the kind of things that definitely do not show up on an org chart.
That is a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Relationships are the unseen web connecting the neighborhood.
Like who actually trusts whom?
Exactly. Who can mediate a dispute? Or how does the information actually travel down a city block when the Wi-Fi goes out?
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like mapping the social currency of the area.
Precisely. You map the social currency. Then third, we map physical assets.
The brick and mortar stuff.
Yep. These are your tangibles. The community centers, the vacant lots that could maybe be used, the vans, the commercial kitchens, the literal infrastructure.
Okay, got it.
And finally, the 4th category is aspirations. This captures what the community dreams of.
Like their vision for the future.
Right. Their shared goals, their vision for a safer street, or maybe a better local economy.
Okay, so the sequence is skills, relationships, physical assets, and aspirations.
That's the 4.
I want to give you, the listener, a way to visualize this because it really helps ground the theory. Think of these first four categories as taking a furniture inventory of a house.
Oh, that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, it is a very real, very useful list of what is physically in the room. Like, you know exactly where the couch is. That's your physical asset.
Right.
You know how the chairs are grouped together to facilitate a conversation. Those are your relationships.
Makes sense.
You know who has the tools to repair the dining table? That's skills. And you have a blueprint pinned up on the wall for adding a patio out back. That's your aspiration.
That analogy works perfectly because it highlights both the utility but also the strict limitation of the whole exercise.
How so?
Well, secular frameworks stop at those four categories: skills, relationships, physical assets, and aspirations, for a very logical reason.
Because they're the easiest to measure.
Exactly. Those are the exact four categories that fit cleanly onto a spreadsheet. They're safe.
Right. You can quantify them.
You can put them in a grant report to a foundation. You can graph them on a nice little chart.
But holding on to that furniture metaphor for a second, if I have all the furniture perfectly arranged and, my spreadsheet is beautiful, why does the house still feel completely dead when a crisis hits?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because when a winter storm blows the windows out, just knowing where the couch is doesn't keep anyone warm.
No, it doesn't. Because a static inventory of furniture cannot generate power under pressure.
Wow. Yeah, it's just a list.
Right. And to be completely clear here, making this distinction is just an analytical observation. It is not a condemnation of secular institutions.
Right. We aren't saying secular groups are acting with malice by stopping at four categories.
Not at all.
Yeah.
That is simply where secular tools naturally reach their boundary. A spreadsheet can hold an inventory of furniture beautifully, but it cannot hold what actually brings the house to life.
So what does bring it to life?
To light the house, to make it function when things get dark, you need the missing piece of the framework. You need the fifth category: spiritual gifts.
Spiritual gifts. Okay, this is where the framework stops being standard community development and becomes something much, much deeper.
It really is a paradigm shift.
But here's the thing that really trips me up. The framework insists on a rigid order. Curd says the sequence is absolutely non-negotiable.
That's highly intentional.
It must always be skills, relationships, physical assets, aspirations, and then, and only then, spiritual gifts.
The sequence is sacred. Spiritual gifts must always come last. You cannot reorder this to fit a different agenda.
But I'm struggling to see why, to be honest. If we are using the house analogy, and spiritual gifts are the electrical current that actually powers the community,
Which they are.
why wouldn't you map the power source first? If that is the lifeblood, shouldn't we identify the electricity before we worry about where the couch goes?
It's a really natural question. But if we push that metaphor a bit further, think about what happens if you just pump high voltage electrical current into a house without running the structural wiring first.
Oh, you blow everything up.
Exactly. You don't get a beautifully lit living room. You get a house fire. You get absolute chaos.
Wow. Okay. That paints a picture.
Right. A room cannot safely name and harness its spiritual gifts
Sure.
until everything underneath is already visible and established.
So the first four categories, the skills and the relationships, those act as the wiring.
They form the vital conduit, yes. The deepest layer of revelation requires the grounding of the first four.
So you need that container.
Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If a community has an incredible outpouring of spiritual zeal or a profound gift for prophetic truth-telling, but they haven't mapped their relationships or their skills.
That energy just has nowhere to go.
Exactly. That energy has nowhere productive to go. It just sparks and burns out. They absolutely need the relational trust and the physical infrastructure in place so the community can actually handle, direct, and utilize that current effectively.
Let's bring this down to the ground level, because for a lot of communities, this isn't just theoretical modeling, right?
Well, not at all.
The stakes of mapping this fifth category are incredibly high. For certain populations, doing this wasn't an academic exercise. It was literally the only way to survive.
We really have to look at the historical context to grasp the weight of this, specifically regarding the Black church in America.
Right.
When we talk about this fifth category in that context, we are talking about institutional survival against overwhelming odds. As Curd writes, and this is so vital to understand, for the Black church, this is not chapter 5. This is the asset class that kept people alive.
The asset class that kept people alive. That is such a heavy, profound reality.
It changes how you view everything.
It really does. It means when the standard 4 categories were systematically denied, like when redlining destroyed physical assets, or when economic systems just completely undervalued their skills.
Which happened constantly.
Right. When that happened, that electrical current was the only infrastructure they had left. But how does that actually work in practice?
What do you mean?
Well, we throw around terms like mercy or hospitality, and they sound like nice, theological ideas, but how do they function as an actual asset class?
Okay, let's picture a Tuesday afternoon in a neighborhood facing systemic deprivation. Institutional support is intentionally absent.
The banks aren't lending.
Exactly. The banks aren't lending, the city is completely ignoring the potholes, and the broader society has engineered a state of artificial scarcity.
A total vacuum of support.
In that vacuum, spiritual gifts become literal load-bearing formation.
Load-bearing formation.
Yes. Take intercession, for example. In this context, intercession wasn't just a quiet prayer offered in solitude. It was the mechanism of community defense.
Yay, how so?
It was a group of elders gathering around a family facing imminent eviction. They were using their profound spiritual authority to organize, to calm panic, and to mobilize whatever relational and physical assets they had left to protect that family.
So the spiritual gift was the actual engine driving the practical solution.
Exactly. Hospitality, in that same vein, isn't just being polite and offering someone a cup of tea.
Right. It's not just manners.
It is a continuous formation of safety. It's the literal safety net for housing, feeding, and sheltering people when the state refuses to do so.
That is incredible.
And that distinction is exactly where standard community development ends and true formation begins. This continuous formation is what allows a community to bear the weight of its own survival.
It's the true foundation.
It's what allowed communities to endure decades of systemic neglect and still produce thriving, brilliant cultures.
Okay, but holding on to that idea of load-bearing formation, I have a major question about this.
Sure. What is it?
If a community possesses these profound spiritual gifts, and they are already using them to survive internally, why do they still struggle so much when outside systems get involved? Why doesn't that immense internal power automatically translate into overcoming external obstacles, like a city zoning board or a massive corporate developer?
That tension you were pointing out is what Curd identifies as the tragedy of the agency gap.
The agency gap.
Yes, because having the asset is only half the equation, to quote Curd exactly on this point. The presence of assets does not equal the agency to use them.
Wow. The presence of assets does not equal the agency to use them, meaning you can have the electrical current, you can have the house fully wired and ready to go,
Yep.
But if an outside force controls the main breaker switch on the street, you're still sitting in the dark.
That captures it perfectly. The power dynamic is entirely skewed. And this is exactly why outside frameworks, even really well-intentioned ones, so often fail when they are brought into these communities.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Imagine a secular NGO comes into a neighborhood with a beautifully organized spreadsheet. They genuinely want to help.
They map the first 4 categories.
Right. They map the physical assets and the aspirations, and they decide, this neighborhood needs a community garden.
Because a garden is tangible. You can put it on the grant report.
Exactly. It's visible. But they haven't mapped the 5th category. They don't realize that the community's most pressing, unrecognized asset is a deep, historically rooted gift for peacemaking and elder-led conflict resolution.
So they completely miss the actual current.
Completely. What the community actually needed was a designated, protected space to exercise that specific spiritual gift to heal recent neighborhood trauma.
But the NGO builds the garden anyway.
They build the garden. They try to transpose their methodology without understanding the deeper spiritual context. As Curd explains, transferability without cultural adaptation is just another form of the wrong transfer.
Just another form of the wrong transfer. That is such a clarifying way to phrase it, because the NGO intervention only addressed the furniture.
Yes.
The community is crying out for a way to channel their electrical current, and the two groups are just speaking entirely different languages.
And we all know what happens next. The garden eventually gets overgrown, the intervention fails.
And usually the community gets blamed in the final report for being, quote, resistant to change.
Which is tragic. When in reality, the outside framework was just completely deaf to the actual power dynamics and spiritual gifts in the room.
Which brings us to the most crucial part of Curd's work. This theory cannot just live in an academic essay or, a discussion like this one. It has to become a physical reality.
It absolutely does. It requires an operating system.
And when we talk about taking this 5-category framework and applying it at scale, we must look at how this operating system functions in the real world.
Right.
This is where tools like Giftscape and the Rooted Path come in. For you listening, if you want to see evidence that this system is real, buildable, and currently being deployed, you can look up rootedpathglobal.com.
It's out there working right now.
It is not just a philosophy. It is an active operating system. But what I really want to know is, what does this operating system actually look like when you put a group of real people in a room?
To really understand how the operating system functions in real time, let's set the scene. We will introduce 2 facilitators running a community session. We will call them Sister Patterson and Brother Williams.
And just to be absolutely clear for you listening, these aren't documented historical individuals we're talking about here. They are illustrative archetypes that we are using to explain how this intense process actually unfolds in a physical space.
Right, exactly. So picture the room. Maybe it's humid church basement on a Tuesday night.
The fans are oscillating.
You've got a diverse cross-section of the neighborhood sitting in folding chairs. Sister Patterson and Brother Williams have been guiding them through the first 4 categories.
Getting the spreadsheet stuff out of the way.
Exactly. It's been analytical. They've mapped the skills. They know the relationships. They've tallied the physical assets, and they've listed their aspirations.
So the structural wiring is securely in place.
The wiring is done. Now the tone of the room shifts. They reach the 5th category, spiritual gifts. How do you think they map this?
Well, I'm guessing they don't just pass out a QR code for a survey.
They absolutely do not send out an email link or pull up a digital dashboard. They create a physical liturgy of mapping.
A physical liturgy.
It is a deeply physical, deeply communal act. The operating system requires the individuals in that room to physically get out of their chairs. They write their specific spiritual gift down on a card, and they have to walk up to a wall in the front of the room to place it there.
Wow.
It is the public act of being seen, named, and counted.
That physical movement changes everything, doesn't it? I'm just imagining the guy in the back row who has had his arms crossed all evening. The guy who has felt entirely unseen by secular frameworks his whole life.
Yeah, he's used to being just a demographic statistic.
Right. The vulnerability required for him to stand up in front of his peers, holding a piece of paper that names his deepest spiritual contribution. Maybe it's mercy, maybe it's discernment, and walking that up to the wall.
It's powerful.
That doesn't just fill out a category. That changes the literal molecular structure of the room.
It breaks the tension,
and
it completely rewires the community's understanding of itself. Curd states this explicitly, and it's at the crux of the physical action.
Yeah.
That walk is the whole exercise working.
Because in that walk, the private burden suddenly becomes a communal asset. That invisible electrical current we've been talking about is suddenly acknowledged by the collective.
Exactly.
By pinning it to the wall, that person is essentially saying, I carry this current, and I am formally plugging it into our shared house.
And that public acknowledgement is the ultimate goal of the entire operating system. The objective is not just to have a wall full of colorful sticky notes.
Right, it's not about the paper.
It is about the vocalization, the witnessing, and the validation of the community. As Curd concludes, and this is really the profound summation of everything we've discussed today, a gift that is spoken back to the person who carries it in front of the people who need it is.
Wow. Let's just let that hang there for a second. A gift that is spoken back to the person who carries it in front of the people who need it is.
It simply is.
It makes it real. Naming the gift brings it into existence as a usable communal tool. That totally bridges the agency gap we talked about earlier, doesn't it?
It does.
When the community sees the current and names it out loud together, they finally claim the agency to use it.
It transforms the community from a collection of isolated individuals who are struggling under unseen burdens into a unified body with true load-bearing formation.
They finally have the power.
They have successfully mapped their furniture, yes, which gives them structure. But more importantly, they have successfully harnessed their electrical current, which gives them life.
It changes absolutely everything about how we look at value, how we look at power, and how we understand resilience. So for you listening, I want to leave you with a provocation to mull over.
That's a good one.
Tomorrow, when you look at your own community, your workplace, or your neighborhood, pay attention to the metrics you use. When you assess what you have, are you just counting the furniture on a spreadsheet? Are you perfectly tallying up the degrees, the budgets, and the physical assets? Or are you willing to do the much harder, much deeper, and much more vulnerable work to map the electrical current? Because until you name that fifth category, you might just be sitting in a beautifully furnished, very dark room. This is the Rooted Path Reflection, a conversation on asset mapping the missing category by Damian Curd.
Wait.
The Rooted Path Reflection is produced by Kingdom Assets, LLC. Stay rooted, my friends.